Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming into another video. All right, so I got two more prospects I want to talk to you about. Keaton Wagler and Nate Ament. Two pretty different prospects. They're not the same at all, in my opinion. I think I'll start with Ament because he's the one I did homework on today. I haven't seen as much footage from him as I'd like to, but I listened to a lot of people talk about him. And what I gathered is this young man is a 6'10 prospect. I don't know how much he weighs, but he's not very girthy or anything like that. He's a guard forward combination, and he has what was described to me as a long way to go as it pertains to his development, his strength building. He is the template of a body that you need on the wing, but he really struggled in his freshman season to live up to the expectations that were provided to him early in the draft process. Last year, he was one of the guys that you would hear top 5 coming up into this year's class. And in Tennessee, from where I understand the spacing is not that great, he didn't really shine. He was just kind of average, 17 points. He was probably their best player, but for him to be this top lottery guy, he may not have wowed in the areas that people were hoping to see. The athleticism isn't really over the top. The shooting was solid. Defense solid. But in the comparisons that were provided were essentially names like Cody Williams, who struggled to kind of make a way for himself because of his lack of strength and athleticism, even though he has a great body and has good pedigree and all of that. At the end of the day, he's slow to develop in Utah. I heard they were mentioning guys like, I think the best name I probably heard was Mikal Bridges, maybe. And so that's a solid piece to have, but it's going to take some time to develop him from what I understand. Nice long body, should fit in the NBA really nicely when he just becomes who it is he's going to become. But for the time being, probably could benefit greatly from some development, either staying in school or spending enough time in the G League to make people feel comfortable about him as a wing. So it's one of those situations where I watched footage of him very briefly, and then listened to the talk, and then watched some footage from him in the locker room after the loss that he took in the Sweet 16, I believe it was, or the Elite 8 maybe. I think his team made it to the Elite 8 and lost there very recently, just a few days ago. And what I took from the kid was that he's really passionate about this game. He was crying a little bit, even though he was holding himself together. It matters to him, and that was something that was very important, because essentially what was described was a player that is very inconsistent, comes and goes, his energy is here and there. What I needed to see from him was a certain care factor that I could believe in, to say, okay, well, this is a kid who will be coachable. This is a kid who wants to win very badly. This is a kid who is going to learn from hard losses like this, and maybe will motivate him to do the work necessary so that he can come out on top someday. And that's what I took from watching him just briefly for 3 minutes, talking about just, what it meant to him to be in college and staying in the moment to help his teammates. He said all the right things after a loss that made me feel confident that he is the type of kid that should be able, with good coaching, to grow greatly in this game. And he cares about winning. He hates to lose. Cares about his teammates, stuff like that. So the character things, the things that I needed to see in the comment section from people from Tennessee faithful, they love him. They want him to come back. These are all the type of characteristics you want to see with a player who is touted as high as he's been, but underwhelmed as much as he did. And so that's what I want to say. I walk away rooting for the kid. I walk away hoping that he's able to make it. I walk away believing that he loves the game, and I walk away believing that it means something to him. So that's what I want to say about Nate Ament. I learned more about him from listening to others and watching him than I did from actually being able to watch any highlights of him. What I did see was a player who had good stutter step motioning, triple threat behaviors, driving at the rim, laying the ball up, not really athletic. I was a little concerned about the offensive rebounding stuff that I saw there. Looked like the effort wasn't always there on the offensive boards. Not really steady, standing his ground in those type of circumstances. So he's going to have to work on his strength. He's going to have to work on his confidence, I believe. And he's going to have to work on his overall just rebounding awareness. From what I understand, the defensive rebounding stuff is good, but if one of his teammates bricks, he's likely not going to get the board. And with him being as tall as he is, you would want him to be better shot blocking and stealing the ball and stuff like that. You want him to be able to dunk the ball. So it was a lot of stuff that just underwhelmed based on just the hype surrounding his name going into the college season. And then what he was actually able to display, which from what I understand wasn't very good. So it becomes a situation where you have to wonder if he doesn't benefit from maybe his draft stock falling to a space where the expectations won't be as high. Obviously, you're asking a businessman if it's best for him to make less money. Hell no. But I think in the long run, when you're talking about building the kid's confidence up and ultimately leaving him with a good enough starting reputation in the league, sometimes it is best to kind of have a guy go in the late teens or something like that, so that when he comes in, there's not as much of an expectation or demand upon him to really help a team win right away. And I think that's what Nate Ament likely needs in his career, is a situation like Cody Williams, to where if you struggle early, you got so much talent around you and so little expectations to win that you got 4 years before people are expecting you to do anything. Cody Williams fell into the perfect spot for a player who was drafted high, but ultimately underwhelmed, because he's still with the Jazz. He most recently had a 30-something point game, and he's able to develop slowly with no expectations that other players drafted in front of him. But the expectations that he could still become what it is people wanted him to become, it just may take a little longer. And that's, I think, the expectations, the healthy expectations for Nate Ament should be. Not that he'll come in and help a team right away, but that he can come in and be a couple-year project, and in 3-4 years down the road, now you got a starter. Now you got a real nice wing with a big body who can help you on both sides of the floor. So if you come in with lowered expectation, expecting to bring in a good young man who cares about winning, who has a good NBA body, but may not necessarily provide NBA strength, may not necessarily be an athletic piece and fast break and stuff like that, but can help you in half-court settings where you need to hit a shot, can help you in half-court settings where maybe he can help defend against somebody who might be like-sized as him, like-bodied as him, you can feel good about this piece. And if you have lowered expectations, his talent will likely exceed those expectations. And listening to Floor and Ceiling, I believe is who I was listening to, he likes this player. And I told you guys, I listen to this guy religiously. Like, if he says something, it's pretty much something I'm going to take as the truth. He likes the player. He just thinks he needs to work on certain things, but he thinks that the shooting is going to translate well. The body and the length is going to translate well. And if he gets really good coaching, he'll be able to reach his ceiling. He thinks his kid is going to be able to do that someday. It's just going to take some time, just like I think. But you have to prepare to instill life into a guy like this. You got to be able to see the good in him earlier before he's able to see it, and you're going to have to be able to dig it in and dig it out of him, reach in and get it out of him. I think it's the type of thing that goes on with Nate Ament. So I think fit would probably be a situation where there's no expectations. I'd like to see him go to like Chicago or something like that. And the reason why I pick a team like Chicago is because I think about where Utah was when Williams was drafted. It was the early stages of a long tanking process, rebuilding process. You don't want him coming in the tail ear of the tank like where Utah is currently, or like where Washington is currently, because what you end up having is too much of an expectation for him to outplay other lottery picks who are on the roster, other guys who are really good but still young players on the roster. You don't want that. You want him to be one of the first young players in the door. Or you want him on a team where they already got a bunch of players that can help him become who he's going to be. So a team like Atlanta, for example, wouldn't be bad. A team like Indiana, for example, wouldn't be bad. A good team like Denver or Lakers or Utah, not Utah, OKC, those type of situations might not be all that bad. But those teams also have a demanding on winning, And if you're the Lakers, you probably want to play. So like that becomes a situation where he wouldn't be ready to play. He's more of a project. But a team that has all this stuff solidified, but maybe has a small forward who's about to retire, Sacramento, for example. I can see Sacramento being a decent spot for him to come in. They still have another couple years where they're going to continue to lose, but there's still a place for a player like him to come in and reach his ceiling and have a real role. That's the type of thing that I think could be really good for him. Brooklyn, I say is the same thing, but I think the problem with Brooklyn is they need to now capture the star player. They don't have their Buzelis. They don't have their Wemby. They don't, you know what I mean? They don't have the guy. They would need him to be that guy. And so I don't really love that situation. I would rather them have some star in place and then be looking for other starters or a second guy or a third guy. Because that's what I think ultimately you hope he becomes. So yeah, that's my Nate Ament take. Easy to root for, but I definitely am listening to a lot of criticism and people who are lower on him than what you would want to hear from a guy who's supposed to be going in the lottery. I think a lot of teams would be wise to probably pass him up based on that commentary. He may very well be a really good player someday, but for where he's expected to be drafted top 7 or 8, what you're essentially investing in is a body. You know, I heard another example was like Ousmane Deng, who's now with the Bucks, but recently with OKC for several years. That's the type of player he's compared to. Ousmane's situation was the type of situation that allowed for him to develop for like 4 and 5 years with no expectations. Now he's finally starting to pop with the Bucks. If he's not going to fall, if Ament's not going to fall into that situation, I'm concerned about his future. You know, that's what it really comes down to. He needs to be in that type of situation. You know, I was listening to conversation on last year on a similar type of thing going on with a guy by the name of Will Riley with the Washington Wizards. He landed in Washington and actually exceeded expectations, in my opinion, because expectations were rather low. People didn't expect that he was ready. He knew he had a good body. He has a good jump shot, but could use some strength, conditioning, and could ultimately use a couple years behind people to learn how to play. When he landed in Washington and has been getting the playing time necessary, and he's been improving a lot. He's been playing pretty good to end this his rookie season. In fact, the Lakers are going to see him tonight. Look forward to seeing him play, but like that's who his commentary, the commentary around Ament reminds me of the commentary around Riley. And so I just want to put that out there as well. People weren't too high on Riley, and Riley's been able to play well in that situation. And looks like he's going to go on to have a really nice career. So that's what I would say about Ament. His draft positioning, where people think he should be taken, makes me a little nervous. Sort of like Kingston Fleming's. It's a little nervous about where they want to take these guys. But if they drop a little bit, just let's say outside of the lottery, I feel wonderful about those prospects. Because the expectation should not be that high. And they do have natural NBA tools by things that you wish try-hard guys had. You know what I mean? Long arms, athleticism, or whatever. In Ament's case, it's length and height for his position. He has that in abundance, so there's likely going to be NBA teams who are going to want him. And another thing that makes it so that people are likely going to want to draft him is in his draft range this season, it's a bunch of guards. In this draft class, in his range, is nothing but 2 guard and 1 guard. He's like one of the only forwards in the range, so somebody who needs a forward is likely going to grab him. I would say that's sound in some ways, but if you feel like I do about him, you probably don't necessarily snatch him, but more so trade the pick. If you don't need a guard, you just trade the pick. That's kind of how I would look at it if I'm where he's drafted, 8th, 9th, 10th, where you're looking in those areas and nothing but guards are the consensus. Don't necessarily reach for a guy that you don't think is ready, especially if you have a need for his position. that's kind of counterproductive if you think it's going to take 2 or 3 years for him to really turn into what it is you're drafting. And when he does, he may have some deficiencies in athleticism and fast break stuff that may make it so even if he reaches his ceiling, he's still going to be a deficient player in that regard. Offensive rebounding, blocking shots. Guys with long arms are supposed to be pretty decent at this stuff. He's not. So it's like, you've seen players like this before who can help you in a lot of key NBA areas, but are deficient in the areas where you otherwise expect players who are built like them to be strong. And I think of a guy like Brook Lopez, who's a bad rebounder historically. Excellent player in other areas, certainly one of the best three-point shooters at the center position of his generation. But like you would expect a guy his height to be able to pull down all types of boards, and he's a terrible rebounder. You feel me? Excellent shot blocker or whatever, but like when it comes to the specifics of rebounding, you better have somebody next to him who specializes in rebounding or your team's going to be deficient because of it. So that's kind of how I'm gathering the conversation around Nate Ament. As to where, yeah, you want to grab him because of his length, but the areas for which his length would be most beneficial don't actually show up. Very strange stuff, man. Very strange stuff. But he's still talented enough to where he can play in the league, and he still has enough strengths in the areas he's good at to make having him on the team 4 years from now be excellent for you. So it's like, if that's going to be what it is, and I need a small forward and I'm in that range, if I don't love what I see in him, I'm just going to trade that pick, man. I'm going to trade down and take the small forward that more so aligns with their draft stock, and I'm going to capture the most value for the pick that I have. Trade down. You know what I mean? If there's a good small forward in the 12-13 range, and I'm taking my 8th pick and I'm trading down, and I'm going to take that guy, at that point. But in this draft, because there's so many guards and maybe so many needs for wings, you may lose that on that guy anyway. You may need to reach for a small forward in this draft in order to get him. So it's a good likelihood that he's going to be taken in the area expected, but the expectations for that draft area, he's basically expected not to live up to. So there are some teams in this draft range that I think will fit that scenario pretty well, because not every team in that range should specifically be either looking to win or are so deficient with talent that they can't afford to wait on a guy. So I think he may end up landing in a good spot anyway. So that's what I want to say, man. I think he'll be a good piece as a role player. If you're comfortable with him developing, you'll be fine having him on your roster accompanied with other stuff. So that's what I want to say about Nate Ament. I wish I knew more about what he does well and what he doesn't, but I listened to hours, maybe almost an hour and a half of commentary on him from like 3 different videos. So I heard what the experts had to say, and I gathered enough to say, as long as you have lowered expectations and time to wait, you'll feel good about having this kid on your team in the long run. You'll feel pretty good about it, I think. So yeah, and then the other prospect we wanted to talk about, God, I can't think of my man's name. But nevertheless, it was Nate Ament and oh God, his name is gone out of my head. Jeez. Well, anyway, this particular player I think is similar in some ways, but he is a comp to like Austin Reeves. And it looks like he's going to be kind of the opposite in that regard. This dude is a knockdown shooter, a very good playmaker, pretty solid ball handler. Doesn't have a whole lot of athleticism, but he's a big body dude, like 6'7", something like that. And coming out of Illinois, and he just got kicked out of these. No, he's in the Final Four. I'm tripping. No, he's in the Final Four, y'all. He was able to make it. His team's going to be playing very soon. His team's still alive, so you'll be able to see him. And I really love what I saw from him. I really love what I saw from him. That's what I will say. Absolute knockdown shooter, a bomb thrower. Gets to the line consistently, hits his free throws when he gets there. Just a really nice piece. And my thing is, you have to, I've learned this lesson in doing homework on players. You have to temper your expectations to say, I really like this player and I would like to bring him to my situation, but I need to have other things in place if I want to make him a winner. And that's what I take from this other prospect from Illinois. He is such a nice shooter, such a nice playmaker, a lot of things, but I don't know that he's a number one. He's not somebody you're bringing in like to change life for you. He's just going to be a freaking excellent role player. Fringe all-star, maybe make 2 or 3 all-star in his career. But more so than anything, he's just a cog to an excellent basketball team. That's what I take from him. So you may overrate him because you love what you see from him, but he's not rim protecting. He's not going to do the heaviest of lifting. He's just going to be a hell of a piece for a winning situation. And so for me in the past, when it's time to take, swings at draft stocks and swings at draft players, I tend to love these type of players, but what you can't find yourself doing is overrating them to the point where you're passing up potential number ones and number twos to take him because you like what you see out of him and he's so good at what he does that you leave people on the table, on the board that are expected to be superstars. You know what I mean? But that's kind of what he may make some people want to do because he is such a bomber. He's such a driver of the basketball. He shoots the free throw so damn well. He does have good length, like 6'6". Good NBA size for a 2-guard. You have seen the success of players at his body type like Austin Reeves, who are not necessarily dunk-a-thon players, but finish very well at the rim and get to the line repeatedly and hit a bunch of threes. Create for themselves, create for others, make plays for others. He got a lot of Austin in him, a whole lot of Austin in him. I absolutely love this player, but I absolutely understand that I can't take him over one of them top 3. Can't do that. Probably ain't taking him over someone with such a ceiling like Acuff. Can't take him over Acuff, I don't believe. But for me on my big board, the guy out of Illinois, of whom name I said at the beginning of the video and have since forgotten, is probably outside of the top 4. He's probably my 5th favorite prospect in this draft. I think I like him. I preference him a little more than Acuff. That's what I will say. I think Acuff has a greater ceiling. But I worry about Acuff's potential deficiencies. I don't think, and I want to back up and say, I don't think I take him over Acuff. I don't think so. I think they're probably, in theory, on 2 different levels. But there are times where you just really like a role player and you really don't love a star. You see what I'm saying? There's stars out there who, of course, they're better than said role player, but this star has so many different holes in his game to where I'm gonna take several stars before I take him. And this role player, there are very few role players I'm gonna take who do what he does over him. You see what I'm saying? So it's that kind of thing here. It's that kind of thing here. I'm not confused about who I expect to be the greater player. I'm just saying based on where they're at, I prefer this player over that player. It's that kind of thing for me. I'm not in love with Acuff because I'm worried about some of his deficiencies being a problem. And if I'm drafting him to be some massive scorer and he can't defend worth a damn, and he's not athletic in this and that, and he's undersized, it could be a situation where I'm thinking I'm drafting Iverson when I'm really drafting Jamal Crawford. Jamal Crawford's awesome. But am I winning a championship if Jamal Crawford's my number 1? Of course not. Am I winning a championship if Jamal Crawford's my number 2? No, of course not. You see what I'm saying? So you can be super talented and still not necessarily be what I need in my situation. I think of a guy like Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas can be a 30-point scorer. Anywhere he goes, if you give him enough shots, he can score 50, 60 points. But is he a star? Is he somebody that I'm just bringing to my situation if I'm trying to win a championship? No, I'm not necessarily. He can help me, but at what he does, he helps me. And I'm worried about Acuff potentially being that type of piece. I ain't worried about homie from Illinois. I ain't worried. I'm not worried. I think he could turn into an Austin Reeves-like piece. I can't think. I'm trying to figure out who else he would remind me of. I don't really know. But Austin is a great example of what it is that I saw. Just excellent footwork, efficiency. Probably a little more naturally efficient than Austin, to be completely honest with you. Because Austin has these games where he'll go for like 6 or 14, you know what I mean? I don't think you're going to see that with this dude too much. But where you see the comp is he has the ability with his body being 6'6" to rebound well, score well, get to the line repeatedly, hit a lot of three-point bombs. Yeah, I absolutely love what I saw from that dude. So like, if I'm looking at the teams that I think he could go to comfortably and really help, if you can get him to play some 3, which I think you may be able to, he's probably more comfortably a 2. But if you can get him to play some 3 sometimes, maybe he can kind of snatch some minutes away from Risachet in Atlanta. If he goes to Atlanta, I think he'd be a great piece to helping them win. Indy, be a great shooting guard in that rotation. I honestly think this piece fits in most situations, if I'm being honest with you. He fits in most situations. But the key is knowing that you're going to need other things in place. You're going to need your rim protector. You're going to need your center. You're going to need your easy bucket getter. And he could create the spacing for that player. He could create that spacing. He could be the guy who gets him the ball. He could be the guy that he finds open at the buzzer. You know, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I really think that's a scary starting level guard in this league. Small forward, shooting guard combination, playmaking, three-point bomber, ball handler. Defensively, from what I understand, he was pretty solid. That wasn't necessarily his game. I think if you're looking at who could potentially be the greater defender, based on what it is that I have in my head, I think you would project Ament to be a bit more capable defensively. I think so, because of the tools that Ament has in theory. But I think right now out the gate, Illinois guy is so much better at really most things right now. So they're both in the same range. They're probably going to fall to like 6 through 10. And for my money, I'm taking homie out of Illinois. I'm taking that piece over Ament in most situations. Because I just think Ament needs so much more work. He's so much more likely to screw up early on. He's so much more likely to not reach his ceiling, in my opinion. And so that's just my take on that. I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but I did say at the very beginning of the video, so I had his name fresh in my head. I should have stuck with it because I knew it was fleeting in my head. Wagler, that's his name. Wagler, Keaton Wagler. Keaton Wagler, there we go. Keaton Wagler out of Illinois. Homie looks like he's going to be special as a starting shooting guard, role guy. I think he's going to be a very, very good role player. And I just think people should continue to expect that he's going to eventually reach his ceiling, but that ceiling is probably just underneath perennial all-star. Maybe 1 or 2 all-star games. I could see him having a really nice career, maybe winning a championship or 2 with the right situation. Yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's going to help a team a lot. So, yeah, that's what comes to mind, man. Keaton Wagler. Get that name in my head and keep it there. I'd like to see him land in a situation where he can really get off the ground early. I think of a team like Golden State might not be bad for Wagler since he shoots the 3 so well. One of his player comps, I believe, was one of the players on the Golden State Warriors. I can't think of his name. He got a brother that plays for the Memphis Grizzlies. Cam and Pat. I can't think of the last names, but I think he was compared to Pat. And with the issue that Golden State's been having with Pajemski at the 2 guard spot, and of course with obviously the injuries they've had to the other players, Moses Moody and of course Jimmy Butler, I think this would be a great spot for a 2 guard. And a guy like Keaton Wagler, I think, would fit in right away, learn a lot, fit in that system. I think that would be a great landing spot for him. I think Golden State would be a great landing spot for him. So, yeah, just a couple of things I think about here. But like for me, I just the Nets keep coming back around as a team that I would just not really want a lot of these prospects to go to. I think that the star player prospects, particularly the top prospect, probably be great as a starting superstar upside, player. Go to the Nets and be the first called. But outside of him, I just think they need so much. And a lot of the prospects in the draft range are guards, for which they have an abundance of. I just don't really like much of anything for Brooklyn, if I'm being honest with you. That's going to sound strange. But, like, if I'm expecting them to draft anywhere from 1 to, 8, none of that stuff I love for Brooklyn except for the top 2 superstar forwards. The top forwards. So, like Peterson, I don't necessarily love Peterson for that team because they just drafted a couple point guards. Hey, he can play some shooting guard, but they got to reimagine their entire team and move on for some young, developing guards to make that make the most sense. And they still have so many needs at forward, in my opinion. So, that would be a perfect spot for the top guy. But, Peterson there, nah, they don't need no guard. And then all these guards we're talking about, Acuff, Wagler, They just role players. That team is still going to win 10, 12 games next year if those players go there. That's the problem. It's so early. I think those kids are going to be losing a lot. They're going to be losing a whole lot next year. Whoever goes to Brooklyn is going to be losing a whole lot next year. Trying to put them in a position to develop a young asset class that's worth talking about. And the problem is now they're removing tanking from the equation. So when I think about the Nets, it's what's the strategy when tanking is removed? Your odds have been, in theory, could still be pretty high that they get a good pick. But you have to wonder, what this means for them going forward as a team that's just getting started on their tanking, quote-unquote, tanking process. And that's what I would say, if we're doing this thing correctly, maybe the tanking rules that they're trying to implement don't get implemented for another 2 years, so that teams that have already started the process of tanking can complete that process, and then new teams who need to not start that process can find themselves not beginning that process. That's what comes to mind for me. I don't think that you necessarily need to stop the process of teams who are already trying to tank. You know what I mean? To better your team, your league. I just think you need to send out the message that, hey, upon expansion, we are going to have new tank rules 2 years, 3 years down the road when those new teams come in. You can keep on doing what you've been doing. Your strategy and your calculus for your team building doesn't have to change so abruptly. But do start preparing 2 years, 3 years from now to not have this be what you are planning out to do. I think that's probably the better way to kind of ease people into it, because a lot of these teams, like Brooklyn, like Chicago, they started tanking last year, and now all of a sudden they have to change what their plans were so that they could properly build their team. And that seems a little unfair to me, to be honest with you. So that's just something I probably would have thought to say if I were in that NBA think tank. Kind of ease people into maybe having to readjust their plans rather than just abruptly having to change the course of what it is they're doing as franchises. So yeah, I think Brooklyn probably got the worst of that, in my opinion. But one thing that was implemented in the proposal was that they take into account the previous two seasons' records. So maybe in that respect, Brooklyn has a good chance of continuing to see great odds at getting the first pick over the next several years. So yeah, this is something I've been thinking about as well. But I'll tell you, man, I expect there to be some trades, draft day trades, man. And as I said, expansion is one of the most important things for the NBA right now because of the guard position specifically. And now you have a guard-heavy draft coming right now. So I think a lot of these guys in this draft and some of the guys that have just been kind of roaming around the league, I think you can find that there are going to be more guards that don't have spots. Some leading guards are going to find themselves in backup roles like Kobe White in Charlotte. Now, you know damn well that's a starter, but he's going to now be rendered as a sixth man because of the abundance of guards. Some guards who would otherwise have positions or roles in the league may actually be in China now. So I just think that this draft is not going to help with that. And I think that those who are drafted in the top from like 7 through 15 are going to have an abundance of guards to choose from. And I think because of it, you could potentially see an environment where there's a change of spots for those draft picks. I think there could be a lot of trades of draft picks, teams that are trading for future picks, that type of thing. I think that's a real thing. And so, we'll see.
What happened? Chico took off? What? Chico took off? Chico took off?
I think that's a real thing, you know. I think at the end of the day, when there's so many guards in the league and so few spots, what you end up finding is average guards on the outside looking in, good guards playing backup roles, and starting guards having very little rope from which to keep their starting spots in the case of injury or circumstances like that. You might find it so that a guy may be getting pushed out the league, that kind of thing. That's why expansion is so important. But, you know, that's what comes to mind, man. I just think we're entering a draft that's going to bring a lot of talent to the league, but maybe an overlap in the same positions. And if you don't need those positions, you can find yourself drafting people to the wrong situations, or maybe see a potential of draft picks being moved, etc. So, yeah, I like, just to double back to what we were talking about, I really like Keaton Wagler. I want to be extremely patient with Nate Ament. I think that's the word. Patience is key for that young player. Patience with him, good coaching, good team environment. People are going to understand his deficiencies early and not be frustrated with those deficiencies when they rear their ugly head. And if you have all of that in place and you understand what his strengths are, a coach that can exploit those strengths and hone him into his best self. Because if he's not in that type of situation, boy, is this a bust situation possibly manifesting that is foreseeable. And so I wouldn't be overly surprised to see Nate Ament fall out of the lottery, because he's the only guy that I've been doing homework on so far that people have probably had more negative to say about him than positive, man. So that's what I can say. All these other prospects are super exciting, and some of the guys that I've yet to hear about, or do homework on rather, are buzzing. And that's the thing. Some of the guys that are quote-unquote behind Ament, they're really making a name for themselves. So they likely, even though they play the same position as the guards, they're likely to start buzzing in a way that may make it so that people don't take Ament, even if they need a forward. So yeah, it's going to get tricky. It's going to get very tricky, and I think that when you look at where we're headed, about 2 months away from this draft, there's still a lot of stuff that can be done. I think for Ament, if I was to tell him anything, I would say the draft combine is extremely important for you. Draft combine, scrimmaging, even more so than testing, because I think testing is one thing, but they want to see you play well against other players in that draft class. When you do them runs, it's going to be incumbent on him to have shown that he's gotten stronger. It's going to be incumbent upon him to show some improvement in his explosiveness, and it's going to be incumbent upon him to continue to keep his turnovers down, because from what I understand, Ament is fairly solid at his turnover ratio. That's one of the things that was a positive about him, is he didn't really turn the ball over per pass. So like these type of things are really, really encouraging and from which to build upon. And I would really, if I were his representation, be trying to coach him up to have a great tournament. A great draft combine. So that's really what it's about for me in regards to Ament. Having that great combine, man. Show these people what you can do in these scrimmages. And don't be discouraged if your draft stock falls, because a lot of that's hype anyway. And, you know, sometimes even though we're not going to get the best money out the gate with the best draft prospects, the best draft positioning is what I'm trying to say. What you end up finding is that if you have lowered expectations, it makes for a more balanced reputation, which as you continue to grow in the league is much less of a deficiency than the higher expectations and you not meeting them. In the long run, you're likely to get more opportunities if you're considered playing average for your draft stock rather than being a bust. And so that's why I would tell people, like, yeah, that first contract is not going to be as hefty, but you're more likely to get more contracts in the future if there's not such disappointment attached to your name. And so that's what I would tell all these young players. Don't be discouraged if you have to stay in school, to make yourself better. Because I think Ament probably should stay in school. I think Flemings should probably stay in school. But if they do, they're likely to drop their draft stock. So I've been wrong about this type of stuff before. Every year there's somebody that I'm wrong about for certain. Usually they're drafted by the Utah Jazz, ironically enough. But those are the two players I'd say, yo, man, they're going to need a little longer to develop, in my humble opinion, than maybe some of these other guys are expected to need. And so, yeah, man, at this point, I think I'm rambling a little bit. I probably got all that I wanted to say out, man. Remembered what Wagler's name was. Excited to see him in the Final Four, although I don't watch college basketball. I'm definitely going to be watching highlights of his games to get a little more hip on what he's up to. I watched a lot of highlights from him yesterday, though. Not as many on Ament, but plan on doing more homework on all these guys. And we're doing it early, man. March hasn't even ended, and we're already halfway through the lottery in regards to all these prospects. So I'm excited about the homework I'm doing this year. And by the time we reach June, I'd like to think that I'm pretty much an expert on all of these guys and will have a much more informed opinion in regards to my mock draft that I've been doing annually for the last 4 years. So that's pretty much it, man. Coming back to report to you guys here and there on these prospects I'm doing homework on. It's been a real exciting process for me. Video 44, I thank y'all for watching.